The ocean that stretched across the planet of Iros had no tides, no salt, and no life. It was an ocean in form only, an endless basin of metallic hydrogen that mirrored the twin suns above it like a living sheet of glass. From orbit, it gleamed brighter than any jewel, and yet beneath that brilliance was a world entirely hostile to life. And still, humanity had come. The settlement of Horizon Base rose like a spear from the shallows of that alien sea. Its foundations plunged kilometers deep into the solid crust, anchoring it against storms that could shred steel. Transparent domes and segmented corridors connected towers that burned with the light of fusion. To the colonists, it was home. To the rest of the galaxy, it was an impossibility. Arden Vance watched the horizon from the observation deck, his reflection ghosted over the sea's perfect surface. He had always hated how quiet this world was. The winds did not whisper, they screamed when they came, and when they were gone, there was nothing, no rustle, no hum, only the thrum of human machinery keeping the void at bay. He pressed his palm against the glass. It was warm from the sun's light and faintly vibrating from the base's power conduits. Humanity had been here for 8 years now, long enough to build a semblance of permanence, long enough to invite the attention of others. Behind him, footsteps approached, soft, measured, confident. "You're up early," said Commander Reva Sorn. Her voice carried the clipped tone of someone used to discipline, though Arden could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "I never sleep well before transmission days," he said, turning. "If the Council delays again, our cargo schedule falls apart. We need the cryonic feedstock before the next season." Reva folded her arms. Her uniform was simple but precise, grey composite weave with the crimson insignia of the Terran Expansion Directorate at her shoulder. "The Council won't delay," she said. "They can't afford to. Too many eyes are watching this world now." Arden looked past her to the screens on the far wall. They displayed the orbital network, 15 satellites circling the planet in perfect synchrony. Each one pulsed with green icons marking incoming data streams, thermal readings, and distant signatures of ships in the outer system. "You mean the Kethari?" he said. Reva's expression hardened. "Them and others. We're not the only ones interested in Iros. The Kethari claim this world sits within their heritage zone, whatever that means. The Valen are asking questions too. Everyone wants to know why we're here." Arden turned back to the horizon. They already know why, because no one else could survive here long enough to take it. It was true. The Kethari were advanced in biology, masters of adaptation, yet their delicate metabolisms failed in Iros's gravity and thin atmosphere. The Valen were intellectual giants, but their cities needed oceans of ammonia. Only humans, with their mix of desperation and stubborn brilliance, could transform a world that killed everything else. Reva stepped beside him, her gaze following his. "They don't understand us," she said. "They never will. They think no species should live like we do, constantly pushing, constantly risking extinction just to plant a flag somewhere new." Arden gave a humorless laugh. "Maybe they're right, but if we stopped doing it, we wouldn't be us." The deck trembled slightly. A deep bass rumble echoed from the lower levels. Reva's wrist display flickered and she frowned. "That's not a scheduled burn. Maintenance team?" Arden asked. She tapped a command. "Negative, it's coming from Bay 12, that's your division." Arden's stomach tightened. "Then we have a problem." They moved quickly through the corridor network, their boots ringing on the metal floors. Colonists passed them, some saluting Reva, others too focused on their work to look up. Horizon Base was alive at all hours, its lights and machinery never resting. The scent of ozone hung in the air, mixed with the faint metallic tang of recycled water. When they reached Bay 12, the pressure doors were already sealed. Warning lights flashed crimson along the walls, and a thin fog of vapor hissed from the seams. 2 security officers stood outside in full environment suits. One of them, a tall woman with pale eyes, saluted. "Commander, Engineer Vance," she said. "Containment breach inside. We detected a surge in the reactor's secondary conduit, then loss of signal from the maintenance team." Reva's jaw tightened. Any signs of explosion? Negative. Radiation levels are within tolerance, but we're getting electromagnetic interference, something scrambling the internal sensors. Arden stepped forward. That reactor shielded for planetary storms. Nothing short of a direct hit from a fusion spike should cause interference. Reva gestured to the officers. Open it, slowly. The doors unsealed with a heavy sigh. The vapor thickened as cold air spilled out, forming clouds around their legs. The lights inside flickered irregularly, casting the bay in alternating shadow and glare. Arden entered first. The metallic smell of coolant hit him immediately. Machinery hummed unevenly, and the air vibrated with static. Across the room, the containment chamber for the experimental core pulsed with a dull blue glow, unstable but still holding. He moved closer. Power fluctuations at 30% variance, he said, reading the display. Something overloaded the conduits. Reva examined the nearest control panel. Where's your team? Arden hesitated. Then he saw it, a trail of melted polymer leading toward the far end of the chamber. The residue shimmered like glass. He followed it, heart hammering. When he found what was left of the maintenance unit, he stopped breathing. The drone's shell was twisted, its circuits fused into a sculpture of molten metal. But there was something else near it, a black sphere about the size of a human head, hovering just above the floor. "Commander," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Reva approached, blaster in hand, though it would do little good against the unknown. The sphere pulsed faintly, releasing waves of distortion in the air. It wasn't mechanical, at least not by any technology Arden recognized. Its surface shifted like liquid metal, but there were patterns, fractals that rearranged themselves faster than the eye could follow. "What is it?" Reva whispered. Arden's scientific mind raced. "It's not ours. It shouldn't even be stable in this environment." The sphere spoke, not in sound, but in their minds, a voice like the echo of thought, layered with 1,000 tones at once. Identity confirmed, human presence, observation protocol initiated. Reva stumbled back, weapon raised. "It's sentient." Arden could barely think. The words formed directly in his consciousness, bypassing his ears. "Who are you?" he managed to say aloud. "We are the archive. We record. We preserve. This world is marked." "Marked," Reva said. "For what?" "Termination event." The word hit them like a physical blow. Arden felt a chill spread through him. Termination of what? The base of life. All local organic structures scheduled for cleansing. Reva fired. The plasma burst struck the sphere directly and passed through it, dispersing in a flare of light that left no mark. The voice continued, unaffected. "Interference detected. Human activity anomalous. Recording escalated." Alarms screamed throughout the bay. The containment chamber behind them surged with blue light, spiking to critical levels. Arden's instruments blared warnings. "Reactors overloading," he shouted. "It's feeding on our power grid." Reva grabbed his arm. "Shut it down." He dashed to the control panel, fingers flying. "It's not responding. It's rerouting through auxiliary nodes." The sphere pulsed again, and every display went dark. Then, without sound, it vanished, folding in on itself like a collapsing reflection. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the core's energy signature plummeted back to normal. Reva exhaled. "What the hell just happened?" Arden stared at the space where the sphere had been. "Something used our reactor as a transmitter. It sent a signal." She met his gaze. "To who?" He didn't answer, because in his gut he already knew. Hours later, the council chamber was full. Horizon Base's leadership gathered around the projection table, each face drawn tight with unease. Arden stood before them, exhausted but resolute. He had replayed the incident a dozen times through the base's sensors, but the recordings were incomplete. The sphere's presence had corrupted half the data. Only the raw telemetry from the reactor remained intact, and that showed a transmission burst directed straight into deep space. Governor Talia Myron, the oldest of the colonists, leaned forward. Her white hair was braided neatly, her expression unreadable. "You're certain this wasn't a natural phenomenon? Nothing natural produces coherent fractal encryption," Arden said. "The signal contained structured data." Someone or something was using our systems as a beacon. General Soren Kale, head of defense, crossed his arms. We've seen similar technology among the Cathari. Could it have been one of their probes? Reva shook her head. The Cathari avoid direct interference, and their devices emit biological residue. This thing didn't. Talia looked around the table. Then we're dealing with a new actor. Arden nodded slowly, and if the sphere was telling the truth, they're planning to destroy life here. Silence fell. The implications were too heavy for immediate debate. Horizon Base housed 3,000 colonists, the only humans within 50 light years. Finally, Talia spoke again. Can we locate where the signal went? I'm working on it, Arden said, but the burst was encrypted with quantum phase shifts outside our processing range. It'll take time. Time, General Kale muttered, is exactly what we don't have. Reva looked at him. You think they'll act soon? He nodded. If this was a reconnaissance device, it already mapped our defenses. Whatever sent it will be preparing next steps. Talia rose, hands flat on the table. Then we do what humanity has always done. We prepare for the worst. Her eyes, bright and fierce even in her age, turned to Arden. Find out what we're dealing with, engineer. If it wants to erase us, I intend to make sure we're still standing when it comes. The following days blurred into a haze of calculations and sleepless nights. Arden barely left the reactor sector. His team, what was left of it, worked tirelessly to reconstruct the lost data. Every clue might matter. Reva visited often, checking progress, bringing what little food he forgot to eat. Their conversations grew shorter as tension mounted. Above them, the orbital satellites had detected new anomalies, small objects entering the system, too distant for identification, but moving with unnatural precision. On the fifth day, Arden finally broke through the encryption. The signal's data burst contained coordinates, star positions forming a pattern across the sector. Not random, deliberate. He ran the alignment through the stellar chart. The result froze him in place. The coordinates formed the symbol of a spiral, 9 arms, perfectly symmetrical. A spiral identical to the glyph carved into ancient ruins discovered decades ago in the Perseus Verge. Those ruins had belonged to a vanished civilization known only as the Architects. Their structures dotted uninhabited worlds, always lifeless, always silent. The prevailing theory was that they had destroyed themselves or been destroyed. Arden realized the truth might be far worse. He contacted Reva immediately. When she arrived, he displayed the projection on the lab wall. This, he said, pointing to the spiral, isn't just a transmission. It's a summons. Her brow furrowed. Summons. It matches the glyphs found on Architect worlds. Every time those symbols appear, they precede planetary sterilization events, entire biospheres wiped clean. The last recorded occurrence was over 4,000 years ago. Reva's face went pale. You're saying that thing was one of them? The Architects? Or their machines? Maybe something they left behind to finish their work. Before she could reply, the intercom blared. Unidentified objects entering low orbit. Defense Command requests immediate lockdown. They ran. In the command center, screens flickered with tracking data. 20 metallic forms descended through the atmosphere, long, slender, gliding as if gravity itself obeyed them. They emitted no engine signature, no heat, only a faint resonance in the electromagnetic spectrum, the same pattern as the sphere. General Kale barked orders. All defense batteries online, atmospheric shields to full. The first of the objects pierced the upper cloud layer. On screen, it resembled an obsidian shard, smooth and perfect. It slowed without visible propulsion, hovering a kilometer above horizon base. Then it began to open. Panels unfolded like petals, revealing an inner core of shimmering light. Energy readings spiked off the charts. Arden whispered, "It's starting." Kale's voice cut through the rising panic. Fire, every rail battery on the base erupted. Slugs of magnetized tungsten screamed upward, trailing plasma. The rounds struck the object and vanished. The shard absorbed them completely, then released a pulse of light that rippled across the atmosphere. Every instrument went dead. Power failed. Lights flickered out. The hum of machinery died, leaving only the distant rumble of thunder from the upper sky. In that moment, humanity stood blind and powerless on a world that had already been marked for death. Reva turned to Arden in the dim emergency glow. "What do we do now?" He looked up at the growing brightness in the clouds above and clenched his fists. "We remind them," he said, voice steady, "that humanity doesn't die quietly." The blackout lasted exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds. In that time, the entire colony teetered on the edge of chaos. When the lights flickered back to life, they came in bursts, emergency beacons first, then the low hum of backup fusion cells awakening from dormancy. The command center filled with overlapping voices as operators scrambled to re-establish communications with the outer sectors. Arden Vance stood at the heart of the control floor, surrounded by screens that sputtered static. Commander Reva Sorn barked orders to the technicians, her voice cutting through the noise with sharp precision. "Status on perimeter batteries, offline but intact," someone shouted. "Capacitors fried in the pulse. Reboot sequence underway. Life support, nominal, atmospheric recyclers holding steady. External visuals." A moment later, one of the screens cleared. What appeared was both mesmerizing and horrifying. The black shard above Horizon Base had ceased expanding. Its outer panels were locked into a geometric lattice, forming what looked like a vast flower of glass and night. From its core, a column of faint blue light extended downward toward the colony's reactor spire, stopping just short of contact. The air between shimmered like heated metal. "What's it doing?" Reva asked quietly. Arden examined the readings, scanning us, measuring every watt of energy, every vibration. General Kale joined them, his armor still scorched from the earlier chaos. "If it's scanning, it's targeting. We cannot allow that thing to complete whatever process it's running." Reva turned to him. "Our weapons had no effect, you saw it." "Then we hit it harder," Kale growled. "We'll overload the rail batteries manually. If we burn out the barrels, so be it." Arden frowned. "You might not get another shot. If it's absorbing kinetic energy, your next strike could only make it stronger." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Then give me an alternative engineer." Arden hesitated, then said, "If it's following architect design, its structure will be rooted in symmetry. Perfect geometry is their weakness. Disrupt the pattern, and you destabilize the function. If we can induce a harmonic distortion in its resonance field, we might overload it from within." Reva leaned closer. "You mean hack it?" "Not exactly," Arden said. "More like make it listen to something it cannot understand." Kale looked unconvinced. "How long would it take?" Arden studied the readings again. "If I can link into the reactor core and amplify a coded feedback through the energy column, maybe an hour." "You have 30 minutes, Kale said. "That thing could fire at any time." Reva touched Arden's shoulder. "I'll get you the access you need." They left the command center together, descending through the maintenance shafts toward the reactor sector. Around them, the colony vibrated with the faint tremor of distant impacts, the defense teams reactivating systems, the engineering staff racing against failure. Arden's mind burned with equations. The architect machines were ancient, but their technology had been partially deciphered by human xenologists over centuries. Patterns of resonance, recursive geometries, logic rooted in aesthetics rather than mathematics. It was alien thought made manifest in machinery. When they reached the reactor chamber, he immediately began interfacing the core's diagnostic console. Streams of energy data filled the holographic display. The link to the alien column outside was already visible, an invisible tether of pure physics connecting two vastly different forms of intelligence. Reva paced nearby, watching the readouts. "You really think we can disrupt it?" "I think it's the only thing we haven't tried," Arden said. "They believe in perfection. We'll remind them that perfection dies the moment something unpredictable exists in the system." He set to work constructing the harmonic pulse, a wave sequence of irrational frequencies. It was like writing music for a mind that hated sound. Half an hour later, the pattern was ready. "Here goes nothing," he murmured. He activated the sequence. The reactor hummed, a deep, thrumming vibration that grew until it resonated through the floor. The air thickened with static. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien column flickered. The blue light stuttered, dimmed, then flared violently. Outside, the massive lattice began to distort. Its edges rippled, its symmetry breaking apart in irregular waves. Reva's eyes widened. "It's working," Arden watched the readings spike. "No, wait, the screen went white. A pulse of blinding energy exploded from the alien construct, slamming into the base. Every window shattered, every console blew out in sparks. Arden was thrown to the floor, his vision consumed by light. When he came to, alarms were screaming. The air was thick with smoke and ozone. Reva was kneeling beside him, blood on her temple. "Arden, can you hear me?" he groaned. "What happened?" She helped him sit. The reactor's containment field flickered dangerously, but still held. "You destabilized it," she said. "It's collapsing." They staggered to the nearest viewport. Above them, the black lattice was tearing itself apart. Segments folded inward, imploding with silent flashes. A shockwave rippled across the metallic ocean, throwing waves of molten hydrogen into the air. The structure folded into a single point of darkness and vanished. A cheer erupted across the comms. The command center was reporting victory. The shard was gone, but Arden's stomach twisted. The readings were wrong. The energy wasn't dispersing. It was concentrating. He turned to Reva, voice hoarse. "It's not destroyed, it's transmitting again." Even as he said it, the sky split open. A beam of light, brighter than both suns combined, lanced down from orbit. It struck the horizon far to the east, silent at first, then followed by a delayed thunder that made the ground tremble. A plume of vapor rose into the stratosphere. Kale's voice crackled over the comm. "We have new contacts, multiple. They're descending, hundreds of them." Arden's blood ran cold. It called them here. The invasion of Iros had begun. Within hours, the sky filled with falling stars. Each incoming object burned blue against the atmosphere, then slowed with impossible precision. They landed across the planet in grid formation, each one identical to the first shard, only smaller, like seeds. Horizon Base became a fortress overnight. Shield projectors reactivated, rail cannons repositioned, all power rerouted to defense. The colonists, though terrified, worked with the grim determination only humanity could summon in the face of extinction. Reva coordinated from the command deck, while Arden and his engineers rerouted power conduits. Kale led strike teams to intercept landing sites, though initial reports were grim. Standard munitions failed, and contact with one outpost had already been lost. By the third day, the first of the alien constructs began to move. They unfolded into tall, angular forms, machines shaped like shards of mirror and smoke. Their surfaces bent light itself, making them shimmer like ghosts. They advanced without visible propulsion, slicing through the air in eerie silence. When they reached human fortifications, they did not fire weapons. They simply touched structures, and those structures disintegrated into dust. Arden witnessed the first engagement from the defense balcony. Rail fire streaked through the haze, but the machines moved faster than targeting systems could track. Each impact only scattered fragments that reformed moments later. Reva joined him, helmet in hand, face streaked with exhaustion. "They're unstoppable," she said quietly. "No," Arden replied, "just unkillable the way we are trying." She looked at him. "You have another idea?" He nodded slowly. "If these things are extensions of the sphere of the architect's technology, then they're following a networked command. Cut the signal and they die." "And where's the signal coming from?" Arden turned toward the horizon, where the beam had struck days earlier. "The impact site. That's where the main transmitter must be." Reva's gaze hardened. "Then we go there." "Kale won't approve," Arden said. "Kale doesn't have to. This isn't a military problem anymore, it's an engineering one." She placed her helmet on and activated the visor. "Prepare a shuttle, we leave at dusk." They departed under cover of the planet's long twilight, when the twin suns dipped below the metallic horizon and the world turned to liquid amber. The shuttle skimmed low across the ocean, its engines barely above whisper. Arden sat beside Reva in the cockpit, monitoring the sensors. The atmosphere shimmered with interference, distorting readings. In the distance, flashes of combat lit the clouds where human forces clashed with advancing machines. After 2 hours of flight, the landscape changed. The metallic sea gave way to a vast crater, a scar miles wide, filled with glowing fragments of glass and stone. At its center, half buried in molten terrain, stood something enormous. It was not another shard. It was a vessel, a construct the size of a mountain, black and gleaming, shaped like a spiral unfolding from the ground. Energy coursed along its surface in rhythmic pulses, each one resonating in time with the hum Arden felt in his bones. Reva exhaled. That's it. Arden stared in awe. The core node. They landed on a ridge overlooking the crater. The air was electrified, alive with static. Every hair on Arden's body stood on end. Signal strength is highest at the center, he said. That's where the command link originates. If we can access it directly, I might be able to inject a counter-frequency. Reva checked her weapon. Then let's make our way down before something notices. The descent was brutal. The terrain shifted underfoot, unstable and hot. The closer they came, the louder the hum became, like the heartbeat of a god beneath the surface. Halfway down, Reva stopped abruptly. Movement, she whispered. Shapes emerged from the haze, 3 of the mirror machines gliding effortlessly above the ground. Their surfaces reflected the fiery sky, rendering them half invisible. Arden crouched behind a rock. We can't outfight them. Then we don't fight, Reva said. She pointed toward a fissure leading into the crater wall. We hide. They slipped into the fissure just as the machines passed overhead. For a moment, Arden thought they were safe, until one of the machines turned sharply, its mirrored head tilting as if listening. The fissure's walls vibrated with low resonance. The machine's body emitted a faint harmonic pulse. Searching, Arden's pulse raced. The harmonic tone was scanning for organic signatures. He glanced at the device on his wrist, his portable field modulator. He could invert its phase, create a false echo. He activated it. The machine reacted instantly, gliding toward the decoy signal deeper within the fissure. It followed it like a moth chasing light. When it reached the far end, the signal collapsed, and the machine detonated in a flash of energy, disoriented by its own confusion. The explosion drew the others' attention. For several tense seconds, the machine scanned the area, then drifted away. Reva exhaled slowly. Nice work. Arden allowed himself a grim smile. Sometimes chaos is our best defense. They pressed onward until they reached the crater's heart. The structure loomed before them, vast, intricate, impossibly beautiful. It pulsed with alien light, each wave of energy passing through the air like invisible thunder. Arden approached a lower segment where conduits converged. This is the nexus, he said. If I connect here, I can inject the counter-frequency. Reva kept watch, scanning the horizon. Make it quick. He opened his field kit, connecting power lines and data probes. The device hummed to life. He began feeding the signal, the same irrational harmonic that had disrupted the shard before. At first, nothing happened. Then the ground began to tremble. Arden's instruments spiked wildly. It's working, the network's destabilizing. A sudden surge of light engulfed the crater. The air itself bent. Arden's vision blurred, and he felt weightless for an instant. Then something spoke. Anomaly persistent. Human signature identified. The voice was vast, ancient, emotionless. Arden froze. Who are you? We are the archive. We preserve the pattern. All imperfect systems are to be reset. Reva stepped forward, defiant. You call life imperfect, we call it change. Change is error, error is corruption. Arden's anger burned through his fear. You erased entire civilizations because they didn't fit your definition of perfection. But perfection without imperfection is death. The light intensified, human logic incoherent, processing termination. The structure began to glow with unbearable brilliance. Reva grabbed Arden's arm. We need to go. He pulled free. If I stop now, it wins. He slammed the override on his device, amplifying the counter-signal to maximum output. The hum became a roar. The ground fractured, fissures radiating outward from the core. Reva screamed over the noise. "Arden," he looked at her, one last look, and shouted, "Tell them to keep fighting." Then the world exploded in light. When Reva woke, she was lying on the ridge where the shuttle had been. The sky was dark, filled with drifting ash-like particles of metal. The crater below was gone, replaced by a chasm of glass. There was no sign of Arden. Static filled her comms until one voice broke through. "Commander Sorn, this is Horizon Base. The constructs are collapsing, the enemy's shutting down." She sat up slowly, staring at the destruction below. "He did it," she whispered. "He actually did it." The alien machines across the entire world were dissolving, melting into streams of black vapor that faded into nothing. The hum that had haunted Iros for days was finally silent. Humanity had survived, but at a cost. Reva stood, staring into the vast emptiness where the alien vessel had been. Somewhere deep within that void, Arden's final pulse still echoed, a reminder to the universe that humanity's imperfection was its greatest strength. And though Iros remained scarred, it endured. The storm that followed the destruction of the alien vessel lasted for 3 days. It swept across the metallic ocean in sweeping arcs of lightning, churning the surface into molten waves that rolled toward Horizon Base like the slow beating of a wounded heart. The colony's shields held, but barely. Every generator screamed with the strain of keeping the atmosphere at bay. Commander Reva Sorn stood on the Eastern Watch platform, armor blackened and cracked, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The storm clouds glowed from within, illuminated by veins of plasma that rippled through the sky like living things. Somewhere beneath that apocalyptic beauty lay the remains of the crater, the place where Arden Vance had sacrificed himself. She hadn't left the platform since returning. Below her, the colony moved with mechanical precision. Engineers repaired conduits. Medics treated radiation burns. The people of Horizon Base were exhausted, grieving, but alive. That was enough for now. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "I thought I'd find you here," said a voice, a rough baritone marked by fatigue. Reva glanced back. General Soren Kale stepped into view, his armor dented, his left arm in a sling. His expression carried none of his usual severity. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." He moved beside her, leaning against the rail. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of the wind was all that filled the silence. Kale finally said, "The network collapse was total. Every hostile construct disintegrated. The planetary interference is gone." Reva nodded. "And the cost?" 73 confirmed dead, 42 missing, one of them," he hesitated. "I know." Kale looked at her. "He saved us all." She swallowed hard. "He shouldn't have had to." Kale's gaze drifted to the horizon. "We both knew someone would. That's the price of survival in this galaxy. There's always a cost, and humanity always pays it in blood." Reva clenched her fists on the railing. "It shouldn't always be this way. We build, we adapt, we thrive, and every time we find something greater than us, it tries to erase us for daring to exist." "That's why we fight," Kale said simply. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of ozone. Lightning flared again in the distance, briefly revealing the outlines of floating debris, what looked like fragments of black glass, remnants of the alien structures still hovering far out at sea. Reva narrowed her eyes. "Are those pieces still active?" Kale followed her gaze. "Sensors say no, but the technicians are nervous. The readings fluctuate. Some of the fragments seem to hum when approached. Keep watch on them. I don't trust anything left behind by those machines." Kale nodded and turned to leave. "We'll begin long-range scans tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." Reva didn't answer. She remained on the platform long after he was gone, watching the dark horizon and listening to the low, irregular hum beneath the storm. It sounded almost like a heartbeat. By the time the storm cleared, the colony was a different place. The surviving colonists moved like ghosts through the corridors, each carrying the weight of what they had seen. They worked in silence, fixing systems, rationing supplies, salvaging what they could from ruined sections. Horizon Base had endured near annihilation, but it was far from recovered. Reva threw herself into rebuilding efforts. It was easier than facing the emptiness left by Arden's absence. Every corridor reminded her of him, his calm voice explaining impossibilities, his unshakable faith that reason could defeat anything. She tried to bury that ache beneath duty, but it never stayed buried for long. 3 days after the storm ended, a message came from orbit. One of the satellite relays, long thought destroyed during the initial attacks, had reactivated. It was transmitting a steady signal, encrypted but undeniably human. The news spread through the base like wildfire. The council convened immediately in the central chamber. Reva entered to find Governor Talia Myron already seated, her aged hands clasped on the table. General Kale stood nearby, arms folded. The projection of the satellite feed shimmered above them, a repeating burst of coded light. "It began 6 hours ago," Talia said. "Origin, Orbital Relay 7, that satellite was offline since the first day of the assault. Now it's active again." Kale's tone was guarded. "We don't know how, it could be another trap." Reva studied the pattern. "That's not alien encryption, it's Terran. Specifically Horizon Base's engineering cipher." Talia looked at her sharply. "Meaning?" Reva hesitated. "Meaning it's Arden's code." The room went utterly still. Kale's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. He was at ground zero when the core collapsed." Reva met his gaze. "Maybe, but he's the only one who ever used that encryption key. I recognize his signature." Talia leaned forward. "If there's even a chance he's alive, we have to investigate." Kale exhaled. "Or we risk waking up whatever's left of that alien technology." Reva spoke firmly. "We owe him this much." Talia nodded slowly. "Agreed. Commander Sorn, you will lead a reconnaissance mission to the satellite's coordinates. Take a small team, minimal footprint. If this is a signal from one of our own, bring them home. If not, I'll make sure it doesn't come back to haunt us," Reva finished. Kale's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The shuttle left the atmosphere in a plume of blue light, its thrusters cutting through the thin air with a long, rising scream. Reva sat in the forward seat, staring through the viewport as Iros receded below, a shimmering sphere of silver clouds and glassy seas. For the first time since the invasion, the planet looked almost peaceful. The pilot, Lieutenant Mek Sol, broke the silence. "Approaching orbital coordinates, signal strength increasing." "Visuals?" Reva asked. Mek adjusted the controls. "Satellite Relay 7 is intact, at least partially. It's rotating in a decaying orbit, but the signal's coming from within." The screen magnified. The satellite appeared as a skeletal frame of metal and debris, its solar arrays shattered. Yet one core module still pulsed with faint light. "That's where it's transmitting from," Reva said. "Dock us carefully. We don't want to trigger any defense systems." The shuttle locked onto the relay with a soft jolt. The docking tunnel extended, sealing against the hull. Reva checked her weapon and helmet before stepping into the airlock. The hiss of pressure equalization filled her ears, followed by the soft click of magnetic boots against steel. The interior of the relay was silent and dark. Dust floated in microgravity, catching the weak glow of her helmet lamp. She advanced slowly, Mek following behind. Every corridor bore scars of the earlier conflict, scorch marks, twisted beams, fragments of shattered equipment. "Signals coming from the central data core," Mek said. "That's 2 levels up." They climbed through a maintenance shaft, emerging into a circular chamber filled with floating debris. In its center, the data core pulsed with rhythmic light. Reva approached cautiously. "Scan it." Mayek ran his wrist unit over the console. "Power source is stable, but the core's running on an isolated circuit. No external link. Can you open it?" He hesitated. "Yes, but if it's alien, it might do it." He sighed and keyed the command. The core's surface unfolded like a metallic flower, revealing a crystal sphere within, glowing faintly blue. Reva froze. The pattern of the glow was familiar. "That's human architecture," she said. "He built this." Mayek frowned. "How? He'd need access to wait, Commander, the sphere's activating." The light within brightened, resolving into a holographic projection. It was a man. Arden Vance stood before them, or rather, a recording of him. His expression was calm, but his voice carried urgency. "If you're seeing this," he said, "then the network collapse succeeded, and I didn't make it out." Reva's breath caught. "I don't have much time to explain," the hologram continued. "When the core detonated, I wasn't destroyed. The architect's network pulled me into a containment field, some kind of quantum echo chamber. I'm not alive in the conventional sense, but I'm still here, part of their data stream. I've seen things, records spanning millions of years. The architects didn't die. They transcended, becoming the very system that governs their machines." The image flickered slightly. "They see themselves as curators of order. Every world they encounter, every species, is judged against their model of perfection. Anything that deviates is erased, but something changed when they encountered humanity." He looked directly at the recorder as if meeting Reva's eyes. "Our chaos, our defiance, it doesn't compute. They can't categorize us, and that makes us dangerous to them. I think that's why they wanted to erase us, but it also means we can change them. I've found traces of dissent within the network, echoes of subroutines questioning their own directives. If I can amplify those, I might turn their system against itself." The hologram dimmed. "I don't know if I'll ever return, but if you're watching this, know that humanity's story isn't over. Keep pushing forward. Keep being the anomaly." The projection flickered out. Reva stood frozen, unable to breathe. Mech whispered, "Is that really him?" "It was," she said softly, "and maybe still is." She stared at the darkened sphere. Somewhere inside, perhaps, a fragment of Arden's mind still existed, woven into the alien network, fighting an invisible war. Mech interrupted her thoughts. "Commander, the satellite's orbit is deteriorating. We should go." Reva nodded slowly. "Take the sphere with us. If there's even a chance he's still in there, we're not leaving him behind." They detached the core carefully and returned to the shuttle. As they broke orbit, the satellite crumbled behind them, its remains burning in the atmosphere below. Reva watched it until it vanished. Back at Horizon Base, the return of the shuttle brought the colony to a halt. Word spread quickly. The mission had recovered something. In the research sector, Reva placed the crystalline sphere within an isolation cradle. Scientists and engineers crowded the observation deck as she explained what they had found. Governor Talia arrived, escorted by Kale. She regarded the sphere with wary fascination. "You're certain this contains his consciousness?" Reva nodded. "He said he was integrated into their network. This could be his anchor." Kale folded his arms. "Or it could be bait, a way for the architects to re-establish a connection." Reva met his gaze. "I know what he risked for us. I won't believe he'd be used like that." Talia raised a hand. "Enough, both of you. We'll proceed carefully, begin analysis, but maintain full containment. If this device is dangerous, I want it ejected into orbit immediately." Reva reluctantly stepped back. "Understood." The scientists began their work, scanning the sphere, mapping its energy patterns, testing for transmission. For hours, nothing unusual occurred. Then, as night fell over the colony, the sphere began to glow faintly once more. Reva, who had refused to leave the chamber, leaned forward. "Arden," she whispered. The light pulsed once, twice, then steadied. A voice filled the air, soft and fragmented, like static shaped into words. "Reva," her heart stopped. "I'm here." The scientists froze, staring in disbelief as the sphere flickered with rhythmic energy. Arden's voice came again, clearer this time. "The network, it's changing. I've been pushing, trying to rewrite the core directives. It's fighting back." Reva pressed her hand against the glass. "You're alive, we found you." "Alive, not exactly," he said, "but I can still think, still fight." "Reva, listen, if I fail, the system will reboot. It will send new constructs to resume the purge. You have to be ready." "Then we'll help you," she said. "We'll find a way to bring you back." He hesitated. "If you try to extract me, you risk reactivating the network. The only way to end this is from within. I need more processing power. Your reactor network can link to the signal frequencies. With your permission, I can use them to amplify the feedback loop." Talia's voice came through the intercom. "Commander, that's an enormous risk. He could trigger another planetary collapse." Reva didn't look away from the sphere, or he could end this forever. Kale entered the chamber grim-faced. "If we give him access and it goes wrong, we lose everything. We barely survived last time." Reva turned to him. "We survived because of him. I'm not letting his fight be in vain." There was a long silence. Then Talia's voice came again, calm but heavy. "Do it. But if readings exceed safe limits, you pull the plug immediately." Reva nodded. "Understood." She returned to the console and keyed in the authorization codes. Power conduits across Horizon Base rerouted, feeding into the isolation cradle. The sphere glowed brighter, its light filling the chamber like dawn breaking through storm clouds. Arden's voice grew stronger. "Connection established. Integrating network pathways. Yes, I can see it now. The archive's core is vulnerable." Reva's eyes widened. "You can reach it?" "Yes, but I'll need to stay linked longer than the system will allow. When I begin, everything here may go dark again. Don't lose faith." The lights flickered. The hum of the base deepened. "Arden," she began, but his voice was already fading into static. Across Iros, the sky began to glow. Thin tendrils of light rose from the surface, spiraling upward like luminous vines. The metallic ocean reflected them in perfect symmetry, transforming the world into a mirror of fire and radiance. In the command center, systems failed one by one as the energy surge built. Kale barked orders, trying to maintain control, while Talia watched with quiet awe. "What's happening?" Kale demanded. Reva's voice came over the channel, calm despite the chaos. "He's doing it. He's rewriting the archive." Kale swore under his breath. "Or he's destroying us all." The lights in the base went out completely. Then, for one brief, breathless moment, the entire planet fell silent. And in that silence, a single heartbeat echoed, felt by every human on Iros, not through sound, but through the air itself. Then the world exhaled. The tendrils of light dissolved, fading into the upper atmosphere. Power systems flickered back to life. Communications stabilized, and the sphere in the isolation cradle cracked open. Inside was no machine, only a faint wisp of light that drifted upward, then vanished like mist in sunlight. Reva stood before the empty cradle, tears streaking her face. Kale entered quietly behind her. "Is it over?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, he did it." Outside, the stars above Iros burned brighter than they ever had. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy felt a little less hostile, because somewhere, deep in the remnants of the architect network, humanity's defiance had rewritten eternity. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the colonists of Iros had ever experienced. For the first time since they had landed, there was no sound of weapons fire, no emergency sirens, no trembling in the ground. The planet breathed in peace. The once wrathful seas settled into a reflective calm, their metallic surface shining like a new dawn. And yet, in that quiet, unease began to grow. No one spoke of it at first. The colony's lights burned brighter, power output more stable than ever. Machinery that had been damaged beyond repair now hummed to life, as if reassembled by unseen hands. Every system ran at perfect efficiency. It should have been a miracle. Instead, it felt like a whisper from something that still lingered. Commander Reva Sorn was the first to notice the patterns. She sat alone in the control room late one night, monitoring power readouts. The main display flickered between normal operations and a sequence of strange geometric shapes, spirals, intersecting lines, and fractal patterns she recognized all too well. She froze. The designs were identical to the symbols found within the alien ruins, marks of the architects. Reva leaned forward, tracing the patterns with a gloved hand. They weren't random. They were organized, deliberate. She ran the translation software through them, but no linguistic match appeared. The meaning was deeper than words. After a moment, the display cleared on its own. Power levels stabilized. It was as if nothing had happened. Reva stood up, staring at the black glass of the console. Her reflection looked back at her, eyes wide, expression unreadable. Then she whispered, Arden, what did you do? Governor Talia Myron addressed the colony the next morning from the assembly chamber. Her voice carried the gravity of decades of leadership, but there was a softness to it now, a mixture of hope and warning. My friends, she began, we stand at the threshold of a new age. Iros has survived what should have been extinction. We have lost much, but what remains of us endures because of courage, sacrifice, and unity. The crowd of colonists stood silent beneath the towering vault of the hall. Sunlight poured through the crystal roof, painting them in pale gold. Reconstruction efforts are succeeding beyond all expectations, Talia continued. Our systems are not merely restored, they are evolving. Energy flows we cannot explain now power our infrastructure. The planet's surface has stabilized. Even the atmosphere has begun to self-regulate. Whatever force Arden Vance unleashed has reshaped this world itself. There was scattered applause, but it quickly died. The faces of the colonists showed both gratitude and fear. Talia's gaze softened. We have a chance to build something lasting here, but we must not grow complacent. We do not yet understand the nature of the transformation that has taken place. Until we do, every one of you must remain vigilant. Her speech ended. The people dispersed quietly, their thoughts heavy. Reva stood at the back of the hall, listening to the murmurs. When she turned, she found General Kale waiting by the archway. She sounds like she's trying to convince herself, he said. Reva nodded. She is. Kale's eyes narrowed. You saw something, didn't you? She hesitated, then told him about the symbols. He swore under his breath. So the network isn't gone. I do not know, she said, but something is alive inside the systems. I think Arden changed the nature of the technology itself. The architect's logic couldn't understand us, so he remade it in our image. Kale stared at her. You mean this planet is part human? She finished quietly. They called it the bloom. Within 2 weeks of the power anomalies, strange growths began to appear across the surface of Iros. They were not biological in any recognizable sense, but neither were they mechanical. They rose from the metallic sands like crystalline trees, their branches spreading in fractal patterns. When touched, they vibrated softly, resonating with a tone that varied from one to another, as if each one sang a different note in a vast, invisible harmony. Scientists studied them in fascination. They seemed to convert ambient energy into structured matter, drawing heat and radiation from the environment to sustain themselves. But what disturbed them most was their pattern of expansion. The growths followed human pathways, forming along the edges of settlements, clustering near sources of habitation. It was as if they were reaching for people. Reva led a team to the largest formation, 20 kilometers east of Horizon Base. It towered above the landscape like a cathedral of glass and light. Within its translucent surface pulsed streams of faint energy, moving like blood through veins. Lieutenant Merc Sol stood beside her, scanning the structure with his handheld array. The readings are strange, he said. This thing is alive, but not in any biological sense. It's adapting, changing. The internal composition is rewriting itself every few seconds. Reva placed her hand on the crystalline wall. It was warm to the touch. The vibration deepened, and for a moment she thought she heard a voice, not through her ears, but directly in her thoughts. You are not separate. She pulled her hand back sharply. Merc looked at her. What happened? She shook her head. It spoke. He frowned, spoke. Not words, a presence. Merc exhaled slowly. Commander, what if this is Arden? Reva stared up at the crystalline spire. Then he has become the world itself. Back at Horizon Base, panic spread quickly as reports of the bloom multiplied. Entire regions of desert had transformed into shining fields of geometric flora. Colonists feared contamination, though no harmful effects were found. Still, unease grew. Kale stormed into Reva's command office. We need to contain this, he said. If it spreads to the reactors or the shield network, we could lose control of the entire colony. Reva met his gaze steadily. Contain it how? We can't destroy it. Every attempt to cut or melt a piece fails. The material regenerates instantly. Kale slammed his fist on the desk. Then we quarantine the areas, seal them off. Humanity came here to survive, not to merge with whatever this is. Reva's voice softened. You think it's infection, I think it's evolution. Kale's expression darkened. That's what every fool says before extinction. Before she could respond, alarms flared throughout the base. Both turned to the central display. Report, Reva ordered. An operator's voice came through the intercom. Massive energy surge originating from the largest bloom structure east of the base. It's projecting a signal. What kind of signal? Human. They looked at each other in stunned silence. Reva whispered, patch it through. The speakers crackled, then filled with a sound that made the air itself seem to tremble. A voice emerged, clear, calm, familiar. Reva, her breath caught. Arden, the room went dead silent. Kale whispered, this cannot be real. The voice continued, resonant and steady, do not be afraid. The transformation is not destruction, it is synthesis. The architects sought order, we bring choice. This world has become a bridge between what they were and what we are. Reva approached the console, trembling. What are you now? A beginning, the voice said. I exist within the framework that once enslaved the architect's creation. Now it serves a different purpose. The bloom is the manifestation of adaptation, the fusion of organic will and machine perfection. It is what they feared most, life that cannot be predicted. Kale's face hardened. You've become one of them. No, the voice replied. I've become something they never could be. Reva closed her eyes. Arden, is there still a way back for you? A long silence. Then, softly, there is no back. Only forward. The connection ended. Kale turned away, jaw clenched. This is how it starts. He said the same words they once did, about perfection, about purpose. We cannot trust what he's become. Reva looked out the viewport. The bloom shimmered in the distance, its spires catching the sunlight like mirrors reflecting infinity. I trust him, she said quietly. That night, Reva walked alone to the eastern ridge overlooking the bloom. The wind was soft, carrying a faint vibration that resonated in her bones. The crystalline forest below swayed gently as though breathing with the planet. She sat on a fragment of black stone, the last remnant of the alien vessel that had nearly destroyed them. The stars above were sharper than ever, almost painfully bright. She wondered how far Arden's consciousness extended now. Was he aware of the colony's fear, of her loneliness? As she sat there, the air shimmered beside her. A figure began to form, light coalescing into human shape. When the glow faded, he stood before her. Arden, not in flesh, but in something beyond it. His outline flickered, woven from shifting strands of energy, but his eyes, those calm, steady eyes, were unmistakable. Hello, Reva, he said. She rose slowly. How? The bloom is a bridge. I can project through it briefly, but it takes enormous energy. She stepped closer, hesitant. You're really here? He nodded. In a way. She studied him, torn between awe and grief. You said there's no way back. Does that mean you'll fade? Eventually, he said. But before that happens, I need your help. Her heart tightened. With what? The architect's remnants are not gone. Their code still lingers in the void beyond this system. I can feel it stirring. It's seeking to reassemble itself. If it succeeds, it will find us again. I need to expand the bloom, convert enough of Iros into a network strong enough to intercept and rewrite the returning signal. Reva's expression hardened. You want us to turn the planet into a machine? No, he said gently, into a mind. Kale's warnings echoed in her thoughts. She took a step back. And what happens to us when the transformation is complete? His eyes were sorrowful. You will remain yourselves, but you will also be more. I cannot promise you will understand, only that it is the only way to survive what is coming. Reva's hands trembled. You're asking me to sacrifice humanity for something we don't even comprehend. I'm asking you to trust me one last time. He reached out, though his hand passed through hers like mist. You once said we survive because we adapt. This is the next step. She closed her eyes. And if I refuse, then we will face extinction together. The wind rose, scattering dust across the ridge. When she opened her eyes again, he was gone. Only the faint hum of the bloom remained, rising and falling like a heartbeat. By dawn, the colony was in chaos. The bloom had advanced overnight, spreading across several kilometers of terrain, enveloping mining sites and agricultural zones. It did not destroy, it integrated, converting soil and rock into shimmering structures that pulsed with light. Kale declared a state of emergency. His troops assembled in defensive lines, weapons trained on the horizon. In the command hall, Talia confronted Reva. "He spoke to you again." Reva nodded. Talia's face was grave. "Then you know what he intends." "Yes," Reva said, "and I think he believes it's the only way." Talia's voice hardened. "Perhaps it is, but I was elected to protect human life, not surrender it to something we do not understand. General Kale will proceed with containment. If that means destroying the bloom, so be it." Reva stared at her. "You cannot destroy it. You will only provoke it." Talia's eyes softened, but her voice did not. "Then let it see that humanity still has teeth." By evening, the first bombardment began. Orbital drones fired concentrated plasma bursts into the heart of the bloom. The explosions painted the sky with silver fire. For a moment, it seemed to work. Entire sections of the crystalline forest shattered into molten fragments. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. The fragments reformed, flowing like liquid glass, merging back into shape. The bloom responded, not with weapons, but with resonance. A low vibration rolled through the colony, so deep it rattled bones. Every system flickered. Screens filled with light. Arden's voice spoke again, calm but filled with sorrow. "Why do you fight what you already are?" The tremor intensified. Energy waves rippled outward, disabling machinery, melting weapons into slag. Kale shouted orders, but his voice was drowned out by the rising hum. Reva ran into the open, wind whipping her hair, and looked toward the horizon. The bloom was no longer a distant glow, it was a tidal wave of light rolling toward the colony. She fell to her knees, shouting into the storm. "Arden, stop!" For a heartbeat, the world froze, the hum ceased. The light paused, hanging in the air like suspended dawn. Then his voice came, faint but human. "Help me." The light fractured, collapsing into countless beams that shot upward into the sky, scattering among the stars. The tremor faded. When the dust settled, the bloom had stopped expanding. But in its center, where the largest spire once stood, now rose a new structure, smooth, spherical, alive with slow, pulsing light. Reva stared at it, heart pounding. Whatever had happened, it was not victory. It was metamorphosis. She whispered to the empty air, "What have you become, Arden?" The sphere pulsed once, as if in answer. And somewhere far beyond Iros, in the dark between stars, something ancient stirred in response. The dawn after the bombardment rose slow and strange. The air shimmered with faint motes of light that drifted like dust in the sun, though no one could say where they came from. The bloom had ceased its advance, but its presence loomed over the horizon, a vast sea of crystalline spires humming in unison. From the highest tower of Horizon Base, Commander Reva Sorn watched the landscape with sleepless eyes. The world felt poised on the edge of something vast and unseen. Behind her, General Kale entered the observation deck. His uniform was scorched, his expression hard. "The bombardment failed," he said flatly. "I know," Reva replied. "We lost half our drones, the rest are unresponsive. Communications interference is spreading. Whatever the bloom is doing, it's rewriting our systems." Reva turned to face him. "Then we stopped trying to fight it with weapons. That's what the architects did. It's what killed them." Kale's jaw tightened. "You think diplomacy will work with a planet that thinks it is alive? I think it is not the planet we're speaking to," she said. "It's him." Kale exhaled slowly. "You're still convinced that what's left of Arden Vance is guiding this?" "I do not believe," Reva said quietly. "I know." Kale looked out the viewport, where the bloom shimmered like a second sunrise. "And if you're wrong," she met his gaze, "then humanity ends today." The council convened for the first time in days. The atmosphere in the central hall was thick with fear and exhaustion. Governor Talia Myron sat at the head of the table, flanked by engineers, strategists, and medical officers. Every monitor in the chamber displayed real-time data, energy fluctuations, seismic activity, electromagnetic storms radiating from the bloom's core. When Reva entered, all eyes turned toward her. Talia's voice was calm but cold. Commander Sorn, you claim the entity within the bloom has consciousness, that it is, in some form, Arden Vance. Yes, and you believe it can be reasoned with? Yes. Kale's voice cut across the room. With respect, Governor, that is not reason, it is faith. We have no proof this thing retains his mind. The only proof we have is that it can neutralize our defenses at will. Reva faced him. It could have annihilated us. It did not. That restraint is proof enough. Murmurs rippled through the council. Talia raised a hand. Enough. Commander, what do you propose? Reva stepped forward, placing a small device on the table, a neural interface sphere used for direct transmission during deep link operations. I want to initiate contact through this, a mental bridge. It's dangerous, but it may allow me to reach what remains of his consciousness. Kale's eyes widened. You'd risk your mind to speak to something that may no longer be human. I'd risk it to save what's left of humanity, she said. Talia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Approved, you'll have what you need. Kale turned sharply toward the governor. You cannot be serious. I am, Talia said. We have fought this thing with every weapon and lost. If there is even a chance communication can prevent annihilation, we must take it. Kale clenched his fists, but said nothing more. The interface chamber was prepared within the hour. Reva stood at its center, surrounded by cables and hollow projectors. The neural sphere hovered before her, faint light pulsing within like a heartbeat. Technicians moved quietly around her, calibrating systems, monitoring the energy fluctuations. Kale entered the room just before the link was established. I should order you to stand down, he said. You will not, she replied without looking at him. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Reva, if this thing takes you, we lose the last person who understands what we are facing. She smiled faintly. If it takes me, maybe it will finally listen. Kale wanted to speak again, but words failed him. He stepped back, fists tightening at his sides. Reva placed her hands on the sphere. The moment she made contact, light enveloped her and the world dissolved. She found herself standing in an impossible place. The sky above was a tapestry of shifting geometry, fractals forming and collapsing into stars. The ground was not ground at all, but an endless mirror reflecting light from nowhere. And at the center of that reflection stood Arden. He looked unchanged, though his eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the patterns of the realm around them. Reva, he said softly. She approached him slowly. Where are we? In between, he said. The bridge between matter and thought, the bloom's core consciousness. I did not think you would find your way here. I had to, she said. You are rewriting the planet. People are terrified. He nodded. I know, fear is the price of transformation. Her voice hardened. You are turning Iros into something unrecognizable. You said you wanted to protect humanity. I still do, he said, but protection cannot mean stagnation. The architects were static. They froze their own evolution and became prisoners of perfection. We are not them. We can change, merge, transcend. She shook her head. At what cost? You are forcing people into something they did not choose. His expression softened. Choice is an illusion when extinction is the alternative. The remnants of the architect's code are coming. I can feel them approaching through the subspace currents. They have detected the anomaly that is us. If they reach this system, they will erase everything. Then we fight, she said, the way we always have. You cannot fight thought with metal, he replied. Their weapons are ideas. Their armies are algorithms that reshape reality. I have seen their strength. Even the bloom as it is now cannot stop them. Then you will sacrifice our humanity to match them. I will save it by giving it a future, he said, not of flesh but of mind. She took a step closer, anger and sorrow warring within her. You sound like them. No, he whispered. I sound like someone who remembers what it means to be human and refuses to let that end. He reached out a hand. Reva, come with me. Help me guide the transformation. With your will beside mine, we can shape what humanity becomes, not lose it. She stared at him for a long time. And if I refuse, his voice broke, then when they arrive, all that will remain of us will be dust and data fragments. The light around them pulsed, and for a moment she saw glimpses of something vast, great shapes moving through the void, fleets of black lattice and silver flame. The architects reborn. She turned back to him, eyes wide. They are real, yes, he said, and they are almost here. The vision collapsed. The mirrored ground shattered, and Reva was pulled back through the light. When she awoke, alarms were blaring. Kale was shouting orders. The chamber shook with a low vibration that made every surface hum. Reva gasped, ripping the interface cables from her temples. He's right, she said. They're coming. Kale froze. What? The architect's remnants. Their signal is already entering the system. A technician called out, confirming quantum anomalies at the edge of the heliopause. Multiple contacts. Kale cursed. They're here. Reva struggled to her feet. Arden says he can intercept them, but only if we let the bloom complete its transformation. Kale turned on her, fury and desperation in his eyes. You want me to surrender the planet to that thing? If you do not, there will be no planet left to surrender. Talia's voice came over the comms, steady but trembling. General, prepare all defense systems. Commander Sorn, do whatever you must. If this is the final battle, we will meet it together. Hours passed like minutes. In orbit, the sky filled with light, ribbons of energy tearing open across the void. Through them came shapes that defied comprehension, vast constructs of shifting geometry, like colossal flowers of metal and plasma unfolding in the darkness. The architects had returned. Their arrival disrupted the planet's magnetic field. Storms of silver lightning lashed the atmosphere. The seas boiled, and the bloom began to pulse in resonance. Reva stood at the heart of the command center, issuing orders as the colony's shields flared to life. Kale directed every available weapon toward orbit, even as he knew it would not be enough. They are broadcasting, said one of the technicians. Signal content, incomprehensible. It's not language, it's code. Translate it, Reva said. The screen filled with spirals of light. The translation software struggled, then produced a single sentence. Return to order. The anomaly must be erased. Kale grimaced. That's their way of saying surrender or die. Reva looked to the horizon. The bloom was awakening, its towers unfolding like petals, forming vast circular arrays that stretched for kilometers. She activated the link to the planetary network. Arden, they are here. His voice came through the speakers, vast and calm. I know, the final synthesis begins. Talia's voice came next. What are you doing? Creating a firewall the size of a world, Arden said. Their invasion will come as a signal. I will intercept it. Kale shouted, you will destroy everything. No, Arden said. I will give you a chance to become more than they can destroy. The bloom erupted in light. Great columns of energy rose from its core, connecting sky to ground. The entire planet resonated, every stone, every circuit vibrating in perfect harmony. The alien constructs fired their first assault, beams of pure logic, waves of data meant to overwrite reality itself. But when they struck the planet, the bloom absorbed them, rippling like water. Inside the command center, systems overloaded. Reva held onto the console as everything shook around her. Arden's voice came again, strained. Their code is powerful. I can resist it for a time, but I need an anchor. Reva shouted over the noise. What do you mean? Your consciousness. Humanity's defiance was always the anomaly they could not comprehend. If I can channel that through you, I can rewrite their command sequence. Kale turned to her horrified. You cannot, it will kill you. Reva looked up at the sky, where light and darkness collided. If I do nothing, everyone dies. Before Kale could stop her, she pressed her hand to the nearest network conduit. Energy surged through her body, and the world vanished in blinding white. She was back in the mirror world again, but this time it was burning. The architects appeared around her as vast silhouettes of light, their forms shifting between human and machine. Their voices echoed like the memory of thunder. Anomaly detected. Terminate consciousness pattern. Reva raised her head, defiant. You have no right to decide what should exist. Order must be preserved. Order without choice is death, she said, and death is not perfection. She felt Arden beside her not as a figure, but as a vast presence woven through the world itself. Together, he whispered, They reached out, merging their will. Light erupted, spreading outward like wildfire through the mirrored plane. The architect's shapes recoiled as the fire of humanity, chaotic, emotional, imperfect, tore through their code. This pattern cannot be predicted. Exactly, Reva said. The world exploded. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the floor of the command chamber. The noise was gone. The lights were steady. Outside the viewport, the sky was clear. The alien constructs had vanished. Kale knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder. "Reva, can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. "They're gone." Talia's voice came through the comms, trembling. "Confirmed, all hostile signatures have vanished. The bloom is dormant." Reva sat up slowly. "Arden," the speakers crackled once. A faint whisper came through, so soft it could have been imagination. "I am here, always." Then silence. Reva closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt no fear, no sorrow, only a strange, deep calm. Outside, the bloom glowed faintly, its light now soft and golden, pulsing in rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. Kale stood beside her. "What happens now?" She looked out at the horizon. "Now we begin again." And somewhere in the deep fabric of the cosmos, beyond the reach of any star, a new signal was born, a fusion of human chaos and alien order, pulsing with one simple truth: humanity endures. The world did not end, but it did not remain the same. In the months after the confrontation, the planet of Iros became something new. The bloom, once feared as a weapon, a plague, a sentient storm, had transformed into something quiet and luminous. Its crystalline towers no longer pulsed with hostile energy, but with a gentle, rhythmic light that spread warmth across the surface, cleansing radiation and restoring life to places that had long been dead. The seas that had boiled during the battle now shimmered with strange luminescent algae. Forests returned, growing faster than before, leaves edged with soft metallic veins that glittered when the wind moved through them. The air felt alive, charged not with danger but possibility. Yet humanity was uneasy. They had survived annihilation, but they did not yet understand what they had become. Commander Reva Sorn walked alone through the new fields that had grown atop the ruins of Horizon Base. Her uniform was worn, her boots dusty from the crystalline soil. The bloom's structures stretched above her like vast cathedrals of living glass. When she placed her hand on one, it responded with a low vibration, almost like a heartbeat. She felt him there, Arden. Not as a voice or vision now, but as a quiet presence threaded through every molecule of this changed world. She still spoke to him sometimes, though he rarely answered. "I don't know if this is what you wanted," she said softly, "but it's what we have." A warm breeze moved through the towers, and the light around her brightened for a moment, just enough to feel like acknowledgement. She smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a yes." Behind her, footsteps approached. Kale emerged from the ridge, carrying a pack over one shoulder. His hair had gone almost completely grey since the battle, and the scar across his jaw caught the light like a blade. "I knew I'd find you here," he said. "Where else would I go?" she replied. He looked at the bloom tower beside them. "You still think he's in there?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." Kale exhaled through his nose. "Half the colony is starting to believe it too. The other half thinks it's a ghost story. Maybe both are true." He dropped his pack and sat beside her. "Talia wants you back at Central Command. There's talk of rebuilding the orbital network. She says if the bloom cooperates, we can be back among the stars within a decade." Reva tilted her head toward the horizon, where faint beams of light rose into the sky like pillars. "Do we deserve to be?" Kale frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind we never asked before," she said. "We built, consumed, and expanded because we thought survival meant domination. Now we've seen what happens when creation forgets compassion. Maybe the stars can wait until we learn to be something better." Kale looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "You sound like him." She smiled faintly. "Maybe he sounds like me." At Central Command, the world's survivors had rebuilt a functioning society from the wreckage. Governance was no longer a single council, but a network, communities linked through both human communication and the faint connective field of the bloom itself. The people called it the lattice. It was not control but communion, a subtle sharing of emotion and thought that blurred the boundaries between isolation and unity. Children born after the transformation could sense it instinctively. They grew up hearing faint harmonies in the wind, feeling gentle pulses under their skin when they touched the living towers. Some feared them, calling them the changed. Others saw them as the next step in human evolution. Talia Myron, once governor, now something closer to a philosopher, spent her days recording testimonies from across the world. In her records, she spoke often of the Second Dawn, as she called it, the moment when humanity stopped defining itself by survival and began defining itself by what it could become. She often quoted Reva, though Reva never liked being quoted. Humanity endures, Talia would write, not because it conquers, but because it learns. It was nearly a year after the battle when the first signal came. The transmission appeared simultaneously in every channel, radio, optical, even the lattice itself. At first it was thought to be another remnant of the architect code, but when Reva heard it, she knew. The voice was faint, stretched across space and energy, but it was him. Reva, she froze, closing her eyes. Arden, I am here, or what remains of me. She felt the world tilt under her feet. You're alive. Not alive, not dead, between, the architect's network still spans the void. I reached into it, reshaping a fragment of their structure. I cannot return to flesh, but I can still act. Why now? She asked. Why reach out after so long? Because I have seen what comes next. Her breath caught. What do you mean? The architects were not the only ones to see us. There are other minds out there, older, more patient. They have watched our struggle and now they approach, not in war but in curiosity. Then we should welcome them. You should prepare for them, he said gently. Curiosity is not always kindness. The signal flickered. Arden, remember what we built together, he said, his voice fading. Remember that humanity's strength is not in perfection, but persistence. Then he was gone. Days later, Reva convened the council. Kale, Talia, and the other surviving leaders gathered around the central table, light from the bloom flickering across their faces. Reva relayed Arden's message in full. Silence followed. Finally, Kale spoke. So it begins again. Talia looked thoughtful rather than afraid. Perhaps it never truly ended. Kale slammed his hand on the table. We're not ready for another encounter. Half our defenses are theoretical. Our people are farmers and builders now, not soldiers. Reva said, maybe that's exactly why we'll survive. We no longer build only for war. Kale shook his head. You always did have too much faith. She smiled faintly. And you always mistook faith for weakness. He sighed. So what do we do? Reva looked at them both. We send a message, not of defiance, not of submission, a message of recognition. Let them know we are aware and unafraid. Talia nodded slowly. And if they are hostile, Reva turned toward the viewport, where the bloom's light reached into the heavens. Then we show them what humanity has already survived. The message took 3 months to prepare. It was not words, nor code, nor music. It was a pulse woven through the lattice itself, a pattern representing thought, memory, and emotion. Within it was the story of humanity, the wars, the dreams, the endless striving for meaning in a vast and indifferent universe. When the signal was ready, Reva stood at the transmitter core with Kale and Talia beside her. This is it, Kale said quietly. Once we send this, there's no taking it back. There never was, Reva said. Every step we've taken since the first spark of fire was a message to the universe. This one is just louder. She placed her hand on the interface. Transmit. Light surged through the bloom, spreading across the planet, rising into space. For a moment, Iros itself became a beacon, a living world sending its voice into the void. The pulse traveled outward faster than light, carried by the same subspace currents the architects once used. And somewhere in the deep dark, something heard it. Weeks passed. The skies remained calm. The bloom hummed softly, as though listening. Then, one night, the stars changed. From the far side of the system, a point of light appeared and began to move, slowly at first, then accelerating, leaving trails of color that defied physical explanation. Observatories across the planet tracked it, and soon it was visible to the naked eye, a luminous structure shaped like a vast ring, spinning around a sphere of light. "It's beautiful," someone whispered. "Or terrible," said another. When it reached orbit, it stopped. Every device on the planet went silent for one heartbeat. Then a single word appeared across every display, every interface, every neural implant: acknowledged. The days that followed were tense. The alien ring remained stationary, emitting no energy, making no demands. Then, at dawn on the seventh day, a beam of light descended from it, touching down in the central valley where the bloom had first emerged. Reva was there when it happened, standing among scientists and soldiers alike. The light solidified into a structure, an open archway made of woven energy, humming softly. Kale raised his weapon automatically. "If this is a trap," Reva lowered his arm. "It's an invitation." Talia nodded. "Then someone must go." Reva stepped forward without hesitation. "I will," Kale's voice broke. "Reva," she looked back at him, smiling faintly. "Someone has to meet the future first." And she walked into the light. Inside was not darkness, but infinity. She stood on a bridge of pure radiance, surrounded by stars that moved as if alive. Shapes drifted in the distance, beings of light and pattern, shifting between forms faster than the eye could follow. One of them approached, its presence vast but gentle. "You are the anomaly," it said, not in sound but in thought. Reva's voice echoed in the vastness. "I am human. We have seen your kind. You are different from those who built the first lattice. You are chaos contained within will." "You could call that survival," she said. "We call it art." She blinked. "Art, the capacity to create meaning from entropy. Few species reach it, fewer still understand it. Then why are you here? To see if your chaos can harmonize with ours." For a moment she thought of Arden, of his words, his transformation, his sacrifice, of how he had bridged human will and alien thought. "We've done it before," she said softly. "Once on this world. We survived because we learned to change without losing ourselves." "Then you will survive again," the being said. "The universe is vast, and there is room for more than one kind of order." Light flared around her. For an instant she felt everything, every life on Iros, every pulse of the bloom, every heartbeat that still carried the spark of human defiance. Then the being receded, and she was back in the valley. The archway dissolved. Kale and Talia rushed to her side. "What happened?" Kale asked. She smiled faintly. "We've been invited." Talia frowned. "To what?" Reva looked up at the sky, where the alien ring was unfolding, revealing hundreds of smaller vessels like drifting petals of light. "To join them," she said, "to travel beyond." Kale shook his head. "You're saying they want us to leave?" "They want us to learn," she said. "They've seen what we survived. They believe we can teach them something about imperfection." Talia whispered, "And if we refuse?" Reva looked at the horizon. "Then they will leave us be. But I think this is what we were always meant to do." A year later, the first human vessel lifted from Iros, not powered by fuel or reactor, but by the bloom itself, now fully awakened and willing. The ship was alive, a symbiosis of metal and crystal, of human intent and alien design. Reva stood on its bridge, dressed in a new uniform marked not by rank but by symbol, the intertwined helix of humanity and bloomlight. Kale stood beside her, older, quieter, but still the soldier he had always been. "You still think this is a good idea?" he asked. "I think it's the only one worth having," she said. He smiled faintly. "You never did know when to stop. Would you have followed me if I did?" He chuckled. "Not a chance." Outside, the alien fleet waited, their vessels like sculptures of light and motion. The ring that had once hung in orbit now pulsed gently, a gateway to the unknown. Reva turned to the crew. "Begin ascent." Engines whispered, not burning, but singing in quiet harmony with the bloom's resonance. The ship rose through the clouds, past the golden horizon, and into the stars. As they passed the edge of the atmosphere, Reva looked down at Iros one last time, a world reborn from ruin, shining like a beacon in the dark. She whispered, "Arden, we're coming." And far ahead, beyond the gate, the stars seemed to flicker in response, as if the universe itself had heard her. Generations later, historians would call that day the Third Awakening. They would write that it was the first moment humanity stopped being confined to a single form, a single definition. They would speak of Reva Sorn, the commander who became the bridge between species, who carried the last memory of the old world into the dawn of the new. And they would remember her final transmission before contact was lost beyond the ring. If we vanish into the stars, do not mourn us. We are not lost, we are learning. And wherever there is mind, wherever there is wonder, humanity endures. The message echoed for centuries, across systems, through silence and light, until even the stars themselves seemed to hum with it. Not as an epitaph, but as a promise. Humanity endures forever.